Andy Barr. Congressman Barr, thank you very much for joining me. You know, as we just heard Jake Sullivan say, the aid now adds up to $1.6 billion in both military, humanitarian, and economic aid since the war began from the U.S., $2.3 billion since the beginning of the Biden administration. But what was interesting to me as we were just listening to Jake Sullivan is how he was going through what I would think would be a very detailed play-by-play of sorts as to what we expect Vladimir Putin and the Russian forces to do from here on out. You know, as we're hearing this, obviously Russia is hearing this as well. So to what end is that beneficial?
Well, it could be beneficial to the extent that we are telling Russia that we know what they're up to, just as the intelligence community revealed during the buildup what they're up to. What is disappointing is that the Biden administration continues to project a weakness and is not providing all of the assistance that could be provided. You know, he mentioned the amount of money in military and humanitarian assistance that the administration has deployed, but that's far less than what the Congress has actually authorized. The other point is that President Zelensky, in a very heroic speech to the United States Congress and to other NATO parliaments, asked for more assistance for a no-fly zone. The Ukrainians have proven that they can defend their country if given the weapon systems, the aircraft, the anti-aircraft, the anti-armor weapons that they need to carry out the fight. Unfortunately, they're not getting the full range of assistance that they could be getting. We need more Stingers, more Javelin systems, and yes, more of those Soviet-era MiGs to be transferred to the Ukrainian Air Force. The Ukrainian Air Force knows how to fly those MiGs. They can enforce a no-fly zone themselves, and we need to get them the help they need, not to mention the additional sanctions pressure that should be brought to bear.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you continue to throw these massive amounts of money, these huge figures, when it comes to trying to fight against the war, if you're still funding Putin and his regime in their efforts to fight the war. And you have introduced a bill, it's called the No Energy Revenues for Russian Hostilities Act of 2022, which supports an effort to close a loophole of sorts in those recently announced U.S. sanctions against Russia. And you say that this is an effort to limit transactions with Russian oil and gas producers. Tell us a little bit more about this.
Well, some in the media have characterized U.S. sanctions against Russian banks as crippling. The administration likes to pat itself on the back for how tough these sanctions are, but there is a gaping loophole in these sanctions that have been levied against Russian banks and the Russian central bank, and namely a loophole on energy transactions. Yes, the Congress did pressure the Biden administration to impose a bilateral trade embargo on Russian oil imports. That was important because it denied Moscow access to petrodollars to fund their war machine, Putin's war machine. But what still exists is the ability of transactions to go through Russian banks when there's a U.S. financial institutions involved, when there's a sale of Russian gas or oil. And so what my legislation would do would simply extend these sanctions to these energy-related transactions. That's where Putin still is getting the bulk of the hard currency that he's using to finance this war. It's a sanctions evasion effort, and we need to close that loophole if we want to really put pressure on the ruble and put pressure on Putin and deny Putin the funding that he is using to execute this brutal aggression against the innocent people of Ukraine.
Yeah, and after